Komplette for Tibidamene in toto. Kodemir
We are talking Shaky Shivers from 2022, and this is directed by Sung Kang, who you may know as the character of Han in the Fast and Furious movies. And I've actually been trying to kind of find this movie to watch for a couple of years. It came out in 2022, just watched it, and the reason I wanted to watch it is because some of the kind of the poster art looks pretty cool. And it appears to be some type of werewolf creature feature. I understand there was more monsters in it. Let me tell you what the story is. It's a kind of horror comedy that's set in the, I think it's the early 90s. And it focuses on two female friends who both work at a kind of like a shake-away ice cream parlour type place. And they have this kind of book of spells for reasons, and one of them gets bit by a witch wearing a hand puppet, and they believe that she is now cursed to be a werewolf. So they go out in the middle of nowhere and in the desert somewhere with trying to kind of find out if she's going to turn on this full moon. And whilst they're there, there's all sorts of comedic and supernatural shenanigans going on. Not just involving werewolves, but involving other supernatural entities as well. What'll happen? You'll have to watch the movie and find out. So let's discuss the positives with this movie. Let's talk about what works. Now, even though I had wanted to see this movie, I was warned that, in other people's opinions, it wasn't very good. So my expectations were tempered. But what can I say that I liked in this movie? I have to say there are some makeup effects that I think are relatively strong. In particular, zombie effects. And we have a couple of sequences that involving zombies, and the zombies are very elaborate. They're not just kind of decomposed humans. There's actually quite a lot more going on with them. And it's quite elaborate makeup. And I thought the prosthetics, the way these kind of, they look more like creatures than zombies, I've got to say. But nonetheless, I thought they were pretty impressive, considering this is obviously a lower budget movie. On the same subject of VFX, we do get a kind of quasi-werewolf scene. We get a sort of partial transformation. And I think, again, I quite liked it. I thought the VFX on this transformation looked pretty good, practically realised. I think some of the inspiration here was horror movies of the 80s, so it's trying to stay away from the CGI and things like this. That was all kind of quite fun. There are a couple of comedic moments that I do think work in this movie. One of the things that I found amusing is how, like, instantly, once the spell is read, the effect happens straight away. I won't say in what context, but they read out these spells and then, like, immediately things kind of, like, happen or don't happen or stop and things. And I thought it ended up having some kind of quite some comedic moments because of that. It's like not like one of these things where, you know, people read a spell and then they go, oh, it didn't work, and then they go away, and it's like, no, this happens instantly. So I quite like that. I think the chemistry between our two leads is kind of quite good, and I think it's almost a little unique in the fact that we have a movie which is about two female friends, that is not about them being like lovers, it's not about them being interested in boys or anything like that. It's kind of like a movie just about you know, friends that are girls that are going on this kind of paranormal adventure, and that's kind of it. And they act like not really girly, they're kind of like nerdy and kind of somewhat slackers and stuff. So I thought they had this kind of quite good chemistry, and that kind of grunge kind of attitude, I guess. This taking place in the 90s, I think it does, even though I wouldn't say really this movie particularly looks like it's taking place in the 90s, I do think it has that sort of, that grungy sort of attitude, at least from our kind of our female leads here. I do think the story, whilst it has some issues, which we'll come on to, I kind of thought it was quite an interesting idea, and in a way it tries to carve out some unique elements to have in the way this kind of story takes place. A kind of a buddy movie involving a farcical situation with a supernatural that kind of keeps on escalating. That again, it's like, okay, it's not completely original necessarily, but I think it's sort of somewhat unique enough to make it feel like somewhat fresh. Some of the kind of the photographer I thought was quite clever. Nothing outstanding in any way, but I do think there are some stylistic choices that I think, again, look, you know, they're a nice idea here, where we're looking like, for example, something going on in the foreground, but then you'll notice something happening in the background, out of focus. You think, oh, that's the real story over there. Things like that. So there are some kind of flourishes, although nothing extravagant. There is definitely some flourishes, at least behind the camera. Okay. So let's discuss now what doesn't work. I feel the movie is not as good as the sum of its parts. I think there's some ideas that work in like a scene, but when you string them all together for a narrative, the movie feels somewhat kind of disjointed, and things seem out of context. It doesn't particularly kind of have a particularly strong narrative flow. You know, the movie sort of starts off with a scene and then kind of backtrack and kind of like it catches us up, and things like the spell book and stuff, there's not really a lot of context in regards to where it's come from. The fact that, you know, one of the girls is bitten by this hand puppet, but she's convinced she's becoming a werewolf, and then she just gives the other girl a gun to kind of kill her. And I'm thinking, that's your kind of solution here, is just to get someone to shoot you. I mean, you don't even know if it's true for a start, and then you're not exploring other avenues or something. Again, it just feels a little bit half-baked. If you are wanting to watch this for creatures, they are in it, but they feel more of an afterthought. Let's be honest. Alright, so without giving you much context, because I don't want to spoil it for you, this movie purports, so when you're looking at the posters, it seems like it's going to be a werewolf movie with a few other things in it. It's not. We never see a full werewolf in this movie, let me just say that. You'll get the idea of a werewolf, you'll get a partial transformation, that is it. You get probably zombies will be your on-screen creature the most. We do get a kind of a witch, and we do get a Sasquatch, but they don't really form major parts of the film. They're kind of like portions within this movie, things to overcome. The humour, outside of a couple of moments, I mean, humour is somewhat subjective, so I feel some people may find things funnier than others, but I gotta say, I don't think the humour particularly is all that strong. There are a couple of like moments that I think will make you grin, perhaps, but I don't think it's a particularly funny film. Some of the humour, I have to say, I personally felt was a little misjudged. I think the characters have a good chemistry. I don't know if they're especially likeable characters that you feel compelled to root for. I do think they're not particularly... We get a lot of kind of banter between them, and I think the chemistry, the relationship kind of like character building between them works, but I don't know if I really felt I got to know the characters really outside of their relationship with one another. because the movie doesn't do the work to really establish anything other than that. And the story, as I say, is not a particularly compelling one. It just seems like half-baked. Like there's ideas here that haven't been fully realised, and you can see where the genesis of an idea might come from, and think, okay, that would have been a good idea if we kind of executed it a little differently. Maybe kind of looked at the kind of the order of events, or the pacing and stuff. We needed to have a little bit more dynamic things happening in certain areas. As it stands at the moment, the movie becomes somewhat tedious at times, and you feel like the bulk of the running time is these two girls either kind of like screeching, arguing, laughing, having banter between one another, and you're kind of like, so is there a kind of story here? And we get little like nuggets of story moments between these sequences. So yeah, I mean, I think it has some things that I kind of liked, but ultimately they didn't amount to a particularly compelling story in any way, that I think is let down by some other elements as well. Overall, yeah, it's not one I think you've got to rush out and watch, if I'm honest. Someone who might find this kind of humour style particularly funny, then maybe you'd enjoy it more. As it stands, I'd give it a 4 out of 10. Have you seen it? What did you think of it? Leave me a comment and I'll look forward to seeing you next time.